Now let's hear from Roscommon's Mick Rock.
Mick Rock, I'm from the Elphin club in County Roscommon. That would be a small rural club. It was the club actually of Dr. Donald Keenan, former president of the GAA. We're very proud of that fact. I would have been involved in my club all my life. By profession, I'm a national school teacher. I have taught in my local national school throughout most of my working life. I now work for Hibernia College as a school placement supervisor. And my involvement in the GAA would have been at all levels. In my club, I would have been a player, a poor enough one, I have to say. But I would also have been, an administrator. I would have had every officer role in it. I would have coached every team in it from under 8 to adult. I would have been involved in Scór. I would have been involved in fundraising, whatever. And I would make no big deal about that, but that's just the nature of it when you are involved in your club. I would have spent maybe a decade and a half to 2 decades with Roscommon County Board in various roles, PRO, Fixtures Secretary, Development Officer, Youth Officer. On a provincial level then at Connacht Council, I would have spent quite a spell there and doing the different roles and finishing as Chairman of Connacht Council. And that brought me to the national stage, 3 years on Central Council, 3 years on management and involvement on a raft of different central committees over the years, and I'm currently chairman of the National Club Committee. So that's my GAA involvement.
Now, the National Club Committee is very interesting in that it was John Horan, I think, invited you in as that, and the club versus county is a huge issue. Is there progress being made, the CPA, etc., is there progress being made on resolving the crisis probably of fixture clashes?
Progress is very, very slow.
Why? Why do you think?
Well, I suppose we are a cumbersome organisation. We have our structures in place as they are, and it takes us a while to get round to changing them. Everybody is fighting for their own space of ground. The inter-county game has expanded to such an extent that the stakeholders therein would be very slow to relinquish any of their ground. But the effect that that's having is that clubs are becoming more marginalised, and I think that is going to be very much a pressing issue of the next presidency, to re-energise clubs, give them more space, more time for their fixtures, more publicity for their games, more resources, more funding, and in particular I think probably more support, advice and training. And from that point of view, I think the establishment of a club department within Croke Park, specifically dealing with all matters club, would be a huge advance in that regard.
I take your point about the need, to give them more time, more dates, but there have already been attempts to do that, and they have failed, arguably.
Well, we are making progress on it at the same time. The All-Ireland finals having been brought forward has created a good window of opportunity at that time of the year that is very beneficial to clubs for their club championships. We also have...
Just on that, do you prefer the All-Ireland finals in August or September?
Ideally, from a promotional point of view, to have them in September was preferable. But, we have such thing as the greater good, and the greater good dictates most certainly that we need to have them earlier to give clubs their space, because that was the difficulty.
Can you see it being resolved with the same number of competitions, or will some competitions have to go?
We have too many competitions. Certainly I would see the pre-season competitions should be the first port of call.
This would be the O'Byrne Cup, the Connacht Leagues.
But it is only useful getting rid of those if, as a result, players were at home in their houses at that time of the year, rather than being driven around pitches or lake shores or wherever else running. There would be no gain in that. But if that was to be replaced by more time off for inter-county players, that would be very useful. Connacht, when I was chairman of Connacht, we were instrumental in getting rid of the Railway Cup. We refused to partake in it, and I think that signalled its demise. So the overcrowded calendar has to be addressed, yeah.
And unpalatable decisions made, obviously, are taken.
Absolutely. You won't fit a quart into a pint glass.
In terms of finance, you have the big counties, the big population centres, obviously have far more earning potential through sponsorship, etc. And then the smaller counties, Roscommon population-wise would be a smaller county, not maybe in achievement sense. Are you concerned that imbalance could become greater
It's very great as it is at the moment, and it's only going in one direction. You know, we've had inequality in the inter-county game always. We've had an inequality of population. We've been prepared to live with that. We've probably also had an inequality of demographics and all that kind of thing of players not being around. But this financial inequality is far more insidious because it is gradually dictating that the richest child in the playground who has the richest sugar daddy is going to win out in the end. And that is a professional model taken straight from the Premiership in soccer, and I think it has no place that we would have that level of inequality brought into a game that purports to have an amateur ethos.
So what do you do about it?
Well, I think there are a number of things you have to do. First of all, you have to create an awareness that it is a problem, and that it's a problem that's going to take us over that cliff of professionalism if we don't watch it. That debate needs to be held under the next presidency, or I think it will be too late. Once it has been held, I think our collective minds can certainly come up with a range of matters which would address it in various ways. Round about the amount of time devoted to inter-county training, I think we have to do something about that by regulation. Perhaps the length of the inter-county season, but in terms of the finance, we have to take steps to cut back on what is permissible as financial assistance backroom teams to county teams. We cannot have a situation where the richest is going to be always the one that's successful. These are going to be difficult, but I think for the greater good, they're going to have to be taken, and they're going to have to be taken seriously. We attempted things in the past. So
cut back on the management teams. Is that the first thing?
Absolutely cut back on the management teams. Absolutely. It has now become a total industry in itself. I think research has shown, and Professor Niall Moyne and others have shown, that the extent of the training and the extent of what has been done with players is not adding significantly to the end product, and that the same could be delivered. We could still have a very healthy, very enjoyable inter-county game with less of the bells and whistles. Even
if you did cap the money, for instance, you'd still have the big centres of population like Galway, Cork, Dublin, and Leitrim, Carlow, Roscommon Monaghan will still struggle numbers-wise.
We always had that, Des. We had that from the beginning of the GAA. There are still counties after 135 years of the GAA that have never won an All-Ireland and haven't won a provincial, much less anything else. I would be very slow to tamper with the concept of counties as they are presently constructed. I think we identify very deeply with the idea of county. Either amalgamating or splitting counties would be a last resort. We may reach that last resort, and certainly when we have 1/3 of the population now living in the greater Dublin area, when we have the country as if it appears to have been almost tilted from west to east, certainly these are becoming issues that are coming ever closer to us. But I think we would lose something very significant by changing our county structure as well.
When you're canvassing votes and you're on the road at the moment, what would you say in traditional hurling counties? Is there a danger they'd see you as Roscommon, he might be a football man?
I don't think so. And ironically, it was me who proposed the new hurling structures at Congress on behalf of the Management Committee of the GAA. I proposed it and I summed it up, and I'd say hopefully I had a significant impact on the debate therein. And perhaps the fact that I came from a non-traditional hurling county, maybe, I was seen as being something slightly more of an honest broker in it. I think it has been seen that the hurling structure that we brought in there is very beneficial, and I think even the sceptical counties at the time are now coming round very much to the idea of it. I don't see myself being treated anyway by hurling counties as he's a football man by any manner or means. We're all GAA people. We all want all aspects of the association to thrive.
What was your favourite day in the GAA?
My favourite day in the GAA, there are so many favourite days, but the one that stands out for me was when my club Elphin won the Roscommon Intermediate Championship in 2003. At the time, I was joint manager of the team. I had 3 sons involved in the panel, and I mean all my neighbours and all the young lads that I had trained for years, that had gone to school to me in the school for years. The community celebration that emanated from that and the kind of raw emotion and joy, you won't replicate it at any other level within the association, I think. And it has sort of sustained a sense for the 15 years since, you know, if you get a little bit of success, it'll keep you going for another while.
When the government helped the FAI in the last couple of weeks financially, we saw basketball then say, well, hey, that's not fair, etc. What did you make of the government helping out the FAI?
We're all involved in sport. We should all be very much pleased that the FAI has been put on some kind of a good footing going forward again. It's in nobody's interest, you know, that something of the size and stature and importance, you know, of a national sporting organisation would be in difficulty or would collapse or anything else like that. So I think you have to recognise that. But of course, we will always fight our own corner and demand that our game, which is such an important part of the fabric of Irish society, gets its due share of the cake, and we'll be making that point forcibly going forward.
What are your main concerns about the GAA going forward? I mean, I know it's very healthy in many years, but what are your main concerns?
My main concerns would centre around things we've touched on already, Des. My main concern would be that if we don't take the necessary steps, that what we have of our amateur ethos will be lost. With it will be lost the values which have sustained us of volunteerism, of community identity, of pride of place, pride of parish, that will be lost. And if it is, I think something very significant would be gone. And of course the concern for the club game, we talk about it as being the basic unit of the association, which it is, but what that means is that that's what sustains us, and that if we haven't got healthy clubs, strong clubs, vibrant clubs, very shortly, if the roots begin to decay or collapse in any way, then you know the whole trunk of the tree and the branches will very shortly follow after it.
Would you be worried that pay for play could be down the road?
Absolutely, and not as far down the road. If we don't take steps, if we keep going on the road we're going, there's only one obvious natural conclusion, and that's pay for play. And the demands we're putting on inter-county players, the ESRI report that showed that we're now devoting 32 hours a week to inter-county activity, which is the equivalent of another week's work. That's fueling the demands for pay for play. More commitment equals more compensation is the mantra of it. And we have to go the other way about it, reduce the demands that are on the county players. If we keep piling on those demands, then inevitably we will lose our amateur ethos and our amateur status.
And that doesn't necessarily mean a clash with the GPA?
I don't think so. Well, maybe it will from the point of view that the GPA would be interested in getting whatever they can for players, but player welfare is at the top of their code of beliefs, and player welfare dictates, and players are telling us all the time that their welfare dictates that they spend less time involved in inter-county activity. So many are turning their backs on it because they reckon that you know that they're not getting the enjoyment out of it, and the commitment is too much, and as one of them put it, the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore. So I think it is something that the GPA, in a partnership model with the GAA, should certainly embrace in return for the financial contributions from the GAA towards their very worthwhile player welfare schemes.
Mick, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks, Des.